Many of us, we live as if the world of taste and touch and smell and feel and sight is all that there is. While some persons have led to the extreme of superstition. I talked about supernaturalism, not superstition. Supernaturalism. That's the basis of our faith. And I told you on Tuesday that even if you want to sterilize Christianity, if you will still have anything close to being called Christianity, it will still be supernatural. Because you cannot deny that Jesus Christ died according to the scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised again the third day according to the scripture. You can't have Christianity without an open door to the supernatural. It's impossible. In John's Gospel, John chapter 14. All right, maybe read from verse 14. If you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. If you love me, keep my commandments. And I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you. For how long? That he may abide with you forever. And then he explains, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it sees him not, neither knows him, but you know him, for he dwells with you and shall be in you. All right? Verse 18. What does it say in verse 18? One more time. All right, so he says, I will not leave you as orphans. That's what it means. I will not leave you comfortless. I will not leave you as orphans. And the follow-up is, I will come to you. Now I don't have time. All right. So I think that what I will do is we'll either look at 2 Peter 1 or we'll look at John 14 verse 18 on Sunday evening. I will not leave you comfortless. Yes, I need to knock off at least one of these things out of the way. When he says, I will not leave you comfortless, that's huge. Then he now says, I will come to you. Maybe on Sunday we'll just do, I will come to you. Is that okay? I will come to you. Now, when Jesus says, I will come to you, what was he talking about? He was talking about the fact that the first bit here is, when I read it, I said, I will not leave you as orphans. That's how I read it. Even though in your translation it says comfortless. That's the word. The word in the original is the word for orphans. So Jesus is speaking from almost a fatherly perspective here. And he's talking to his apostles as to children. And to say that even though it will look as if I'm about to go the way of all the earth, I will not leave you as orphans. And then he said, I will come to you. The reason why I paused there is because there are layers of how we must understand I will come to you. You see, in the same chapter, and I think in the 3rd verse, this chapter is a chapter where he says, you trust, you believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And then in verse 3, he says, I go to prepare a place for you, isn't it? In verse 2. All right? In verse 2, he says, In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. So when he said, I will not leave you as orphans, or I will not leave you comfortless, I will come to you. I will come to you. Now, you remember the verse we just read now? He's saying that I'm going to go and prepare a place for you. And if I prepare the place for you, what will I do? He says, I will come. So in verse 3, he says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again. So the idea of this coming is still the idea that we are looking at here. So when he says, I will come again, in what sense is he saying, I'm going to come again? Do you get it? And that third verse of the 14th chapter alone would give us, at least there is about 3 ways that we must understand it when he says, I will come again. I will come again and receive you unto myself. So this coming of verse 3 is, I will come again, and when I do come, I will receive you unto myself. And the idea is so that where I am, there you also may be. Then in verse 26, let's see. In verse 23, maybe. Okay, yes, in verse 23. Jesus answered and said unto him, if a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and we will come unto him and make our abode with him. So at least in this one chapter, you have seen Jesus making reference to this coming at least 3 places, isn't it? We saw it in verse 3, I will come again. I will come to you. And we saw it in verse 23, that it says, if anybody loves me, he will keep my commandment. And if you keep my commandment, my Father will love the person, and we will come to him. We will come to him and make our abode with him. In verse 3, he says, I will come again, and then I will take you to be with me, so that where I am, there you also might be. In verse 18, he said, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. Somewhere in the mix of this coming must be some kind of spiritual experience. That's the point I'm trying to drive out for this evening. Since I'm going to be looking, by God's grace, at the bigger thing, I will focus on this passage on Sunday. So what you've taken from here immediately is the fact that from the rendition in John chapter 14 alone, we have seen 3 different verses in the same book of John 14 where Jesus talks about coming. And when you look at the context each time, you will agree that he is not talking about the same experience every time that he talks about coming here. Because in verse 3, he says he will come and take you to himself, so that where he is, you can be there. In verse 23, he says he will come and make his abode with you. And then in verse 18, he says, I will come to him. I will not leave you as orphans or comfortless. I will come to you. And he does not qualify what that coming is and how we must understand it. So in the one, it's like he will come and take you. In the other, it's like he will come and stay with you. And in the third, he just simply says, I will come to you. So my point is, in looking at spiritual experiences, we see Jesus making a promise. And he makes this promise when he was about to go to the cross. And the promise he makes when he was about to go to the cross is a promise that you would have thought was probably out of place. Because exactly at the time when you are about to depart is when you are saying, I'm coming, I will come, I will come. But you are living. Do you get it? You are about to leave. And yet you are saying, I will come. I'm trying therefore to say that spiritual experiences from the standpoint that I'm looking at it for us as believers is something that has grounding. That is to say, it is something that is established upon the biblical the chronology of the unfolding drama of biblical history. To say that in the progression of revelation, when Jesus was about to leave the earth, that was when he made a promise to us that he was going to come. And if you look at the three passages, the three verses at least in question, you will realize that all of those comings do not refer to the eschatological, like the final end of things when Jesus is going to come again the second time. Because he is literally talking to apostles and disciples that would die long before his second coming. When he says, I will not leave you as orphans, I will come to you. However you understand that, it cannot be the second coming of Jesus. Are you there? The people that were the immediate recipient of that promise were not going to be here when Jesus will come again. So if Jesus is saying, I'm not going to leave you comfortless, I'm not going to leave you as orphans, I will come to you, it meant that they had reasons to expect the fulfillment of that word, at least in their lifetime. Can we agree on that? So what we'll do on Sunday, like I said, by God's grace, is therefore to look at the senses in which Jesus says, I will come to you. And we will see how the application of that is supposed to alter your expectation and alter your interaction, or at least alter the way that you interact with God in the here and now. Because these promises were not promises that were just made to people that lived once upon a time and then it ended with them and it has no applicability anymore in the world that you and I currently inhabit. Because if you remember in Acts of the Apostles, this is, okay, we've not started reading Acts. In Acts of the Apostles, are you there? In Acts of the Apostles chapter 2, on the day of Pentecost, when Peter stood and Peter is preaching the gospel, or when Peter stood to preach the gospel, first and foremost, Peter needed to bring clarity on account of a misconception that was being rumored and whispered by the audience that had gathered. What was it? They said, this man is like they are drunk with new wine. So when Peter rose up with the other apostles to speak, he first had to bring clarification. And the clarification was to say that these men, verse 11. Verse 11. Okay, so these were the people that heard them speaking the wonderful works of God. Verse 12. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, what meaneth this? And others mocking said, these men are full of new wine. So verse 14 is now his response. In verse 14, Peter's response was to say, but Peter standing up with the 11 lifted up his voice and said unto them, ye men of Judea and all that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you and hearken to my words. Verse 15, for these are not drunken as you suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Okay? Verse 18, and on my servants and on my handmaidens I will pour out in those days my spirit, and they shall do what? And they shall prophesy. Now, I need you to notice, first thing, verse 17, it shall come to pass in the last days. Let me hear you say last days. Let me hear you say last days. So the things that follow here are things that are supposed to be the markers of the last days. that it will come to pass in the last days. And this was what Peter said 2,000 years ago. If 2,000 years ago, Peter was saying that what happened on the day of Pentecost, that was witnessed by the people prophesying, speaking in tongues, if he's saying that this that you are seeing now is that which was prophesied by Joel, to say that it will come to pass in the last days. Peter therefore was saying that his days 2,000 years ago were part of the last days, because he's saying the prophecy of Joel that there are things God will do in the last days, those prophecies are now being fulfilled. So Peter is applying Joel's prophecy of the last days to their experience of 2,000 years ago from our own standpoint. The argument therefore is to say, if Peter felt that 2,000 years ago qualified as last days, hello, after last, last is last. Are you there? If you are in the last days, there can be no more days once the last days have finished. By the time the last days have expired, we will now be expecting to enter into the eschaton. We will be stepping now into eternity. The last days we hand over to eternity. Is that okay? So, however long it has been since that day that Peter was speaking, it means that the days that you and I are inside are part of the days that are known as last days. And there are things that will mark, there are things that will shape, there are things that will be features, characteristics of the last days. And Peter was saying this on the basis of prophecies that came to us from the Old Testament in the book of Joel. So it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh. You know, there's a slight distinction or difference between the way that the prophecy appears in Joel chapter 2 and the way that Peter quotes it here. You know, in Joel, the prophecy is, it shall come to pass in the last days that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. In Acts of the Apostles, okay, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. So it will come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit. In Acts of the Apostles chapter 2 verse 17, it says, and it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, I will pour out of my spirit. In Joel chapter 2, I will pour out my spirit. In Acts chapter 2, I will pour out of my spirit. Hello? Have you seen the difference? In Joel, I will pour out my spirit. In Acts, I will pour out of my spirit. I'm really starting to feel like a Pentecostal. Hey, I wish I had time. You see, the thing that Peter was quoting, he said to them that what you have seen here is a quotient. Are you there? What you are seeing here is a quotient of what was promised. What you are seeing. Okay, by that I mean, see, he said, I will pour out of my spirit. I will pour out of my spirit. Out of my spirit. Out of my spirit. Joel said, I will pour out my spirit. Peter said, I will pour out of my spirit. Because what Peter is doing is application. Do you understand that? Yes, what Peter is doing is application. Peter begins by saying, this is that which was spoken by Joel. And he is now appropriating to the context of that immediacy, the thing that Joel had said. So the big prophecy of Joel is that God will pour out his spirit upon the last days. All I'm trying to say is, Peter tells us on the day of Pentecost that God had poured out of his spirit. And I want to say to you that whatever it was that happened on the day of Pentecost, wherever that came from, is still coming from there. What they had on the day of Pentecost was out of his spirit. And I want to say to you that out of the same spirit, God is still pouring. I will pour out of my spirit, out of my spirit, out of my spirit, until the last days will hand over to eternity. God continues to pour out of his spirit. If men 2,000 years ago qualified to enter into the promise of the last days, the blessedness and the things that God had preserved and reserved for people to experience in the last days, bro, 2,000 years later, we should come with greater intensity, fervency, hunger, desire, appetite. Because it's like, if God already started to fulfill things that were designated for the last days, if he started to do them 2,000 years ago, how much do you imagine that we would qualify for them now? Because however long the last day still is, we are still closer to the last of the last days than Peter was. Are you there? And that difference is not in months. It's not just in years. It's in thousands of years. We are at least 2,000 years plus closer to the last of the last days than Peter was. Our experience, therefore, must be more intense, because the path of the just is like the shining light. It shines brighter and brighter unto the perfect day. They go from strength to strength. Every one of them in Zion, appearing before God. We go from glory to glory. There's a progression. There is an upward mobility that the church is supposed to be experiencing as a corporate entity, and there is an intensification of spiritual experiences that we must be experiencing as a people as we look forward to the second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Spiritual experiences, they are part of the DNA of the church. The church was born, the church was inaugurated by spiritual experiences that required somebody to come and stand and give explication and give perspective to say, no, don't mistake what is going on here for drunkenness. These people have just had an experience. And said, this experience is that experience that Joel prophesied about. And part of that experience is that people will dream, people will prophesy. Some persons will see visions. The other day, Peter was waiting for food. And while he was waiting for food, he entered into a trance. And in that trance, he saw four-footed beasts and things that ordinarily would be called unclean in a sheet that came down. And he heard a voice that said, arise, kill, and eat. Are you there? Yes, rise up, kill, and eat. There's nothing in all of Scripture that says that God has stopped bringing those kinds of experiences to people. That's what I'm saying. Are you there? There's nothing in all of Scripture that says that God has forgotten how to bring those kinds of experiences to people. Now, in Acts of the Apostles chapter 26, let me close here. Verse 13. At midday, O king, I saw in the way a light from heaven. A light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. Verse 14. And when we were all falling to the earth, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. And I said, who art thou, Lord? And he said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. So after Sunday, when I come back again, I will. So you people, nobody should ask me for the theme for Ignite. I'm giving it to you now as it's coming. When we come back after Sunday, when we are coming again, we do, I was in the Spirit. I was in the Spirit. We need to take a look. We need to do a little bit of a forensic on the experience of John the Revelator. You remember John? I was in the Spirit on the lost day. We need to reclaim the supernatural roots of our faith. Are you there? Yes. Christianity is in a category that is called supernaturalism. We cannot be too educated to abandon the, I don't want to say mercy. You see, the realm of the Spirit is chaotic, depending on the standpoint from which you come from. Are you there? Why I say it's chaotic is because there are still ongoing intrigues in that realm. The kinds of things that happen overhead, in order for us to have the kind of semblance of normalcy that we have in our natural world, you will not believe it. And sometimes God will need to open your eyes, because you need to bring a certain level of participation and cooperation with the host. You know, there is a host that is above. And we form part of what you might call the ground army. But there's an aerial army. But it's one family, it's one formation. If there is a disconnection between the aerial force and the ground force, things can go bad and needless casualties can emerge. When he had this experience, that voice that spoke to him in the Hebrew tongue said, but rise and stand upon thy feet, for I have appeared. Let me hear you say, I have. Let me hear you say, I have. One more time, I have. Now, a final time, say, I have appeared. Now, the voice said, for I have appeared unto you for this purpose, to make you a minister and a witness. For this purpose, to make you a minister and a witness. There was an appearance. He says, I have appeared. I have appeared unto you for this purpose, and it is to make you a minister and a witness, both of these things which you have seen. Say one. Say one. Then he says, and of those things in which I will. Let me hear you say, I will. I will. What is the will here? I will appear. So on the one hand, he says, I have appeared. And by the time he was about to go down, he says, I will appear. That means I will be back. Are you there? Are you there? The experience you have just had is not going to be the first. It's not going to be the first and the last. No, it will be the first, but it will be the first of experiences. I have appeared unto you, but I want you to know I will appear. And some of us, we don't even have a testimony of I have appeared. 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 The one that says I have appeared says I will appear. I mean, sir, won't you even allow this man to enjoy this one first? The man was having an encounter, an experience, and in that experience, they were already giving him the promise of subsequence. I have appeared. I will appear. That's why I want us to pray. I don't know that there's anybody that cannot find one of those two to use as the firewood. Are you there? Yes, that you are going to use to look for fire tonight. It is either I have appeared or you are looking for I will appear. I will appear. Listen to me, listen to me. Our experiences of God, I don't have time, I've not had time this evening to show you any of those things. I told us, I don't know if I did on Tuesday, that there are certain persons whose encounter, you remember in 1 Samuel chapter 3, isn't it? The last two verses of 1 Samuel chapter 3. The last two verses of 1 Samuel chapter 3. And all Israel from Dan. Let's know. Verse 19. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan, even to Beersheba, knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared how? Again in Shiloh. Why? For the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again. The Lord appeared again in Shiloh. I have come to you. I will come to you. For Paul, the Lord said, I have appeared. And he says, I will appear. For Samuel, and the Lord appeared again in Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord. So the Lord appeared again in Shiloh because there was a man there. It's been a while. The word of the Lord was scarce. There were no open visions. But then, a man by the name of Samuel had found favor with the Lord. Things were so bad in those days that when God came to Samuel and said, Samuel, Samuel, because there has been no memory of divine encounter for so long in the land. Nobody taught Samuel that as you are doing this priesthood now, he may come to you. Nobody taught him. So when the Lord came, he went and met a man. The Lord came again. He went and met a man. A man can squander a divine opportunity if he's not well taught. And his matter was so bad that the Lord had come to him 3 times. And all 3 times he missed it. He went to meet a man. So by the 3rd time, that was when Eli, memory, muscle memory, kicked in. And he's like, hey, I think I may be able to diagnose what is going on here. I suspect it's the Lord that is finding his way back into his temple. And he says, I perceive it's the Lord. Then he says to Samuel, he said, go and lie down. And if he calls you again, and I'm sure you've heard me use that word, if. It is a serious matter. Eli didn't say, and when he calls you, he said, if. That is to say, we are not sure. You had 1, 2, 3 opportunities, and we lost them. There is no guarantee that you will have another opportunity. But he is looking like Abba is desperate. I'm sorry to use the word desperate, but from a human standpoint. Because why is he coming back on one night? He came again. So he might come again. Just in case he does, this is how to behave yourself this next time. If he comes, say, speak, Lord, for your servant heareth. If we don't position ourselves by knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, we can go through life squandering opportunities that the Ancient of Days gives to us, so that by them our profiting might appear unto all. It was on the heels of that visitation that the verses we have read were written at the end of that passage, at the end of that chapter, that the Lord was with the boy Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and the Lord did not let any of his word fall to the ground. That is to say, if a word came out of the mouth of Samuel, God will put his hand behind it, underneath it. so shall my word be that goes forth out of my mouth. It will not come back to me void, but it will accomplish that whereunto I send it, and it will prosper therein. That became the outcome of the words of Samuel. God will not let the word from his mouth drop to the ground. That means that Samuel could not speak a word that did not come to pass. How? It was because the Lord appeared again in Shiloh.